Welcome to this supplier management presentation, which will actually show you how to assess suppliers within your particular organization. This could be very useful for a governance manager or a quality manager that has the task of assessing a supplier's ability in certain process areas. The assessment that I'm about to show you is a generic supplier management assessment based on the capability maturity model. The PremaGroup has CMM assessments for every single ITIL process that you can purchase through the PremaGroup or the PremaGroup distributors. So let me take you through how you can assess the suppliers. What we're doing is we're using the capability maturity model table as an example of how to achieve a particular maturity level. And as you can see from these maturity models, you have 0 to 5, 5 being the maximum. What we're aiming to achieve are 3 and 4, which is shown on this next slide in more detail. At control level, this describes a formalized process in which the process objective, activities, inputs and outputs have been defined. The output is formalized, consistent and repeatable. There is one common process across the organization. This process is documented, understood and used by all staff. A classic example here with suppliers is for you to be able to ask, say, a change coordinator, for example, have they seen their process detail design? Do they understand their role within that process? If they can't put their hand to this particular document, or they can't describe their role in full detail, then I would suggest they're not at level 3. However, the assessment questions themselves are a way of determining which particular level they have reached. You may also wish to attribute a percentage value to this, rather than a straight 0, 1, 2, 3 or 4. Percentages are often easier to be able to gauge their progress. So giving you an example of the supplier assessment, they may have achieved ISO 20000, for example, but there are 64 questions that need to be addressed. And each question you can mark them 0 to 5. For the process to make sense, there needs to be a pragmatic approach in that you could get a score of 2.2 or 2.3 or 2.4. My advice is for you to stick to whole numbers, and this will be easier for you to gauge their progress as you move forward. You should aim to reach a level of 4, which is an integration layer, which will prove that their processes are integrated and their service delivery team are integrated and they speak to each other, so they're not operating their processes in a silo fashion. So let's have a look at some of these questions. On this demonstration, I'm not going to show you 64 questions, but I am going to give you an extract, an example of what these questions are like. Number 1. Is there an identified process owner? Number 2. Have the roles and responsibilities for the process been clearly defined and allocated? Number 3. Is the scope of the process defined and documented? Number 4. Does the process owner agree the scope? Number 5. Is the responsibility for adherence to the process allocated and accepted? Number 6. Very important in a multiple supplier environment. Are the customer's responsibilities documented? Is there a RACI, for example, responsibility, accountable, consulted and informed table? Have you been shown this? Is the approach to the process consistent throughout the organization? This is a classic example of the right arm not knowing what the left arm is doing. Just some basic questions and prodding in these areas will give you that pragmatic view of how well they know their process. Looking at questions 9 to 16, you get the idea with the types of questions. By purchasing the PremaGroup assessments, you will have access to all of these 64 questions, not just for the supplier but for every single process, i.e. incident management, problem, change, and so forth. So you will be able to gauge internally how well these suppliers are doing. So many clients that I've worked with do not have any benchmarking criteria in which to benchmark the suppliers. So how do you arrange the scoring? You total the scores for each process. So you have 64 questions, and they could score a maximum of 5 for every single question, detailing 320. So looking at your percentage, simple maths, 320 times 100, an example score for instance, in this case for the example they've scored 117, which gives them a resulting percentage of 36.56. Upon contract award you could set them a target score for instance of 45% or 50%, and then do these interim audits to see how well they're doing. I hope this has given you a taster, for the contents of some of our assessments. Please contact the PremaGroup, www.premagroup.com, for further information and the prices for our assessments. And good luck with the management of your suppliers or your internal teams. Thank you for listening.